So I'm going to start my story off with the obligatory backstory. And I warn you, there's some incoming sadness. My wife Rachel and I grew up in a largish town of close to 30,000 people. We knew each other from an early age, roughly 6 or 7, I can't specifically remember. We were practically inseparable. At 16, we officially started dating each other. When we turned 18, we moved away for work in a city just a few hours' drive away. By 20, we were married and had bought our first house. At 22, we discovered that she was pregnant with a baby boy. It was then that disaster struck. About 5 weeks before she was due to go on maternity leave, a large shelving unit collapsed and crushed her. I was told that both her and our child were killed instantly. 2 of her work colleagues where this had happened had also been injured in the accident. One left paralyzed, the other losing his leg after it had to be amputated. The company that she was working for had implemented a cost-cutting measure. They decided to continue using old shelving that had been written off as unsafe instead of replacing it. I still haven't forgiven those executives and management personnel that made that decision. It wasn't long after that I was told I had a choice on how to proceed with what her company called compensation, but I called it blood money. They wanted to settle out of court to avoid a lawsuit. I, on the other hand, was out for their blood. Just to clarify here, this is not the revenge. This is still backstory. Fortunately, due to the coverage that it got, and involving several politicians, the case was settled quickly in court, roughly 3 years, in which the payout for all parties was close to 10 times the amount they had initially offered. A lot of fines were given to them for breaches on work, health, and safety. Executives were sacked, others jailed. This could be a story on its own. In this time, I was still working my job in telecommunications. My mother, bless her soul, had moved in while all this was happening to help me. I think it would have fallen apart if she hadn't been as involved as she was. It was around this time that I was offered a promotion, but it involved a lot of travel around the state. I made a request to have an office in my hometown's branch, as I wanted to not only take care of businesses in the state, but in my hometown also, as there was no business representative located there, to which my company agreed. After a few months, we settled into a routine of 1 to 2 weeks in the city office, 1 week in my hometown, and 1 to 2 weeks visiting the rest of the state. After a year, I decided to buy a house in my hometown, so I wasn't having to stay at my parents' place every week, or so that I was at home and I could come and go as I pleased. Important for later on in the story. It's about 4 years after this where our story begins. I just returned from one of my trips on Friday and was checking in some stuff at my office when Harry, the branch's managing director, walked in. We had grown up together, but had gone to different schools, and since coming back, had developed a pretty close friendship. He asked how things were, and then asked me if I wanted to come to a house party that he was having that evening. Short notice and all, but I said yes. I felt like a few drinks with my friends were in order. It was there that Harry introduced me to Catherine. She was a new hire at the branch where my hometown's office was located, and was getting to know everyone, being that she was new in town. We hit it off immediately. As much of a cliche as it sounds, it was almost as if Rachel was right in front of me, instead of Catherine. I won't bore you too much with the details, but after 2 years of dating, we decided to take the next step, and she moved into my hometown's house. Everything up to this point had been going really well. Catherine and my parents got along, and Rachel's parents also approved. They were happy that someone could make me just as happy as Rachel had done. All was going well for close to a year, and that's when things started to change. Skype sessions were cut short suddenly. Neighbors would tell me about how a car, described to me like it was Harry's, was always seen parked in the back alley near my house whenever I was away. Some clothes that weren't mine, I found in my wardrobe. All signs pointed to her cheating, but she said that nothing was happening. She said that Harry would come over occasionally to discuss business, things like that, but no way would he ever spend the night. I chalked it up to me being paranoid and continued on as if nothing was wrong. But there was always this feeling that something wasn't right. It was close to 6 months after that I discovered she had been lying to me. I had just finished closing a rather large contract with a new company, and negotiations had wrapped up earlier than I had anticipated. So instead of sticking around for the next few days, I decided to pay for an early flight home and surprise everyone. Fast forward a few hours and I drive into my hometown and down the alley behind my house so that I could get into the house without being seen and surprise Catherine. Some part of me was curious, however, as to whether this mystery car would be there. Sure enough, there was a car that was blocking the back entrance gate. I was confused for a moment, wondering if it had just been a neglectful neighbor parking, only to realize that it was indeed Harry's car. If it hadn't have been for the high hedge line that I had put in a few years back for privacy, I may have well driven past my own place. Pulling up behind his car, I got out and thought it was strange that he was there so late, as she claimed that he always had left by now. As I approached the back of the house, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Catherine and Harry were going at it hammer and tong. I froze. Time stopped. There was my close friend having sex on my kitchen bench with my girlfriend. I didn't know what to do. So many questions were running through my head. Was this real or was I dreaming? Why were they having sex in my house? Feeling defeated, I turned and left without them seeing me. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity. I was crying, hard. But the sadness, that quickly turned into anger. The same kind of anger I felt towards those that were responsible for Rachel's death. I wanted to hurt them, badly. As a pacifist, I don't believe in violence. But it was then that I knew I was going to punish them. And I made it my mission to destroy their lives. And what better time to start than right now? I moved my car back up the alley, far enough away from my driveway that I could still see Harry's car. Then walked to the back gate where I could see into the house, and I called her phone. They were still going at it when it rang. They both looked at the caller ID and did a double take when my name came up. I could see that she was considering answering it, but they let it ring out. After a few moments, they were back into it again, and I dialed once again. This time, she did answer. As she was answering, I hung up and made my way back to my car. As soon as I did, she called me back. She asked why I was calling as late as I was, and I told her that I was about 10 minutes from home and didn't want to scare her coming in. She obviously was shocked and acted happy that I was coming. The call ended pretty quickly after, and she said she was going to get up and get changed into something. I said bye and hung up. Well, a few moments later, Harry came peeling through the gate, still half naked, jumped into his car, took off like a bat out of hell. I smiled a little, knowing the fear that both of them would be feeling from being so close to being caught. I waited a few moments before turning my car into the same place Harry had been moments earlier. The night was fairly uneventful afterwards, and it wasn't until after she was asleep that I got up and went to my office down the hall. I couldn't sleep. I knew that I needed a plan, and plan I did. Now, my mother always taught me to be nonviolent and to allow cosmic karma to take its course. But on this occasion, I decided that karma could use a helping hand. I decided to punish them separately, but destroy both of them equally. I knew that Harry had a drug habit. Nothing major, but it was something that he worked very diligently to keep private. I only knew about it accidentally, after seeing some coke and weed left out in his place, but I pretended I hadn't seen anything when he made attempts to cover it up. I began calling some of my more unsavory clientele and made a few discreet inquiries into obtaining some samples that they were willing to part with. A few days later, I had a decent enough stash for my plan to work. About a month later, I had friends, including Harry, around for a barbecue night. After making sure that I sufficiently liquored up Harry, I told him to stay the night and sleep it off. In the early hours of the next morning, I took the drugs and an assortment of my personal belongings. I placed them at various places around his car, with the biggest stash in his tire well, confident that he wouldn't find them over the next few months as the rest of my plan took effect. I locked the car up and went inside to sleep. I also placed some more drugs and personal items in his house after driving him home the next morning because he was far too hungover to do it himself. A few days later, I staged a break-in by smashing the back pane of my back door into my kitchen and leaving it open before heading back to the city for a flight. I had several messages the moment I landed. One from my clearly panicked mom who had found the back door smashed open and had called the cops. One from Catherine in tears, and one from the local police asking me to call them. After returning all the calls, I informed the police I was away on business and that I would be back the following week to talk with them. While away, I got Catherine to stay with my parents until after I got home and asked my dad to organize one of the local security companies to install cameras and an alarm system, after getting the go-ahead from the police as to not ruin the scene of the crime. After getting home, I did the usual, "My God, I can't believe this has happened, and why would anyone do this?" routine. After doing a thorough check of everywhere, finding that the items I had taken were missing, and filing a police report, I had the security company's rep talk Catherine and I through how the cameras and alarm system worked. Then came the question I'd been waiting for. The question of what happens if we're doing some business and don't want it recorded. Catherine acted a bit shy while asking this question, but I knew exactly the reason she was asking. He assured us that this was a question he got asked a lot, and we were shown on the home computer if we wanted to be doing things without it being recorded, how to stop the recording for certain cameras so that we could protect her modesty. As I was walking him out, I asked him if the cameras were turned off, could a notification be sent out just as a security precaution? He came back in and helped me through how to set up email notifications and left shortly after. Fantastic. All I had to do now was wait. At this stage, I approached the legal advice subreddit for some help in relation to couples law in my country. I needed to make sure that my upcoming plan could be legally done and that I would not be forced to pay out any money or equity to Catherine, as I didn't know if we were classified as a de facto couple or not. Being the sole benefactor of Rachel's estate, I didn't want to be left with any nasty surprises where Catherine could take any of the estate away from me. Shout out to those guys and gals over there as they helped me get into contact with a great lawyer who assured me, due to the fact that although we had been dating for close to 4 years, we had not been living together long enough to be classified as de facto, and because I was paying all the utilities on the property that she was living in and didn't pay rent, that showed that she had no legal standing to make a financial claim against me. Just to be sure though, he drew up what I felt was a pretty ironclad document just in case there was any legal trouble. The following week, my work had approached me and offered me a promotion to move back to the city and run the team that I was a part of, meaning I wouldn't need to travel as often and just serve the one location. And due to the success of being located in my hometown, they were considering having 3 to 5 representatives spend 1 to 2 weeks in the larger surrounding towns, including my hometown, as part of my team. I said yes and began the process of starting a transfer, which would take about 6 weeks. Perfect. More than enough time to gather all my evidence. Upon getting back home the following week, I began to put in motion the rest of my plan. I asked Harry to approve 1 week's worth of vacation for Catherine in 2 weeks' time. I wanted to send her and a friend or two away on a retreat before I made the biggest decision of my life for a second time. He jumped up and gave me a huge hug, congratulating me on being prepared to take the leap again. I hugged him back tight, but not the way I think he imagined it at the time. He agreed and blocked out the week for me. I asked him to not say anything to anyone, as I wanted to make it as big of a surprise as I could. I knew that it would spread like wildfire around the office regardless, but that was my plan. That night, I told Catherine that I had booked her and 2 friends to go to a tropical spa resort, all expenses paid for a week. No questions asked. Pick 2 friends and come back to the biggest surprise of her life. She screamed like a kid who had just been told that all the candy in the shop was hers to have. I then told her that the following week, I was going to spend it in the city, preparing for a large client who was one of my biggest accounts, and needed some people on my team to help before flying out the following week. I wouldn't be home until the Monday that she was leaving, so I wouldn't be able to see her, which seemed to disappoint her. But I told her that it would be worth it when she returned. What I failed to tell her was that I had decided to take 2 weeks vacation on the other side of the country, mentally preparing myself for the storm that was about to erupt the moment she stepped foot on the plane, as well as enjoying my first stage of freedom. On Sunday, 2 weeks later, I flew back and began driving home. Once getting there, I had done a quick pass by my house and made sure enough that Harry's car was there. Like the first night I had caught them, I parked a little ways back and checked the cameras. Asleep, in my bed. No surprise, honestly, as I had recorded them constantly doing this over the 2 weeks I had been away. I then made my first call to the police, blocking my caller ID. I told them that I was one of my neighbors and saw someone shady hanging around in their car in the alley behind my house and occasionally passing something through the windows to passing cars, all while looking into my yard. I was concerned that they were dealing drugs or going to break into someone's property. I gave them Harry's license plate and the description of the car. They said they would have someone over there in a few minutes, so I thanked them and hung up. I then called Catherine and told her I was about 10 minutes from home and that I knew she was flying out tomorrow, but desperately wanted to surprise her. Looking back at the footage now, I laugh at the commotion that I'm surprised I didn't hear. In a few short seconds, Harry was half dressed and flying out the back door to his car. At that point, I couldn't have asked for a more perfect scene. As Harry was peeling away, one of the police cars rounded the corner behind me. They saw Harry driving away fast and promptly gave chase. After pulling in, greeting an excited Catherine, and doing all the couple things, she fell asleep again. I, on the other hand, couldn't sleep a wink. The next day, her and her friends were bundled into a car. After they drove off, I had to wait a few hours, but I began to execute my plan. I called my friend, who was a removalist, and apologized for the late notice, but I needed my place to be packed and moved on Friday. After agreeing on a time, I told him that he would need to take certain boxes to a storage facility, which he said wasn't an issue. Then I began packing up Catherine's belongings. Later that day, I got a call from the police for me to come and identify some property that they had apprehended from a suspect the previous night, one that fit the description of property that I had reported stolen. I grinned to myself, happy that my plan for Harry had grown to fruition, and replied that I would be there shortly to collect it. Of course, when I got there, some of the items were still unaccounted for, due to the fact that they must have still been in his house, and they hadn't searched there yet. By this stage, the town was buzzing with news. Events in my hometown don't stay secret for long. Harry was disgraced and promptly fired for his possession of drugs and stolen property. Our respective bosses on behalf of the company had extended a formal apology towards me during the week. That night, I went to my parents' house and told both mine and Rachel's parents what had happened, omitting certain details and that I was moving back to the city after being promoted, but Catherine wouldn't be a part of it. They were pretty upset initially that I hadn't let them know what was going on, but were happy that I was handling everything maturely and hadn't sunk to their level, though they didn't agree with me ghosting Catherine. But after some drinks, laughs, and tears, I went home. On Friday afternoon, after a busy week of organizing cleaners for the following week, the real estate agent to put my house on the rental market, and various other tasks at my hometown's office, I packed some things into my car and drove to my parents' place and said goodbye before the drive. Before leaving, I went to Becky's house. Becky had been one of Rachel's closest friends growing up. She was the only other person who knew what was happening, minus the details about Harry. Without her help, I wouldn't have been able to organize everything as quickly as I had. I gave Becky a large manila folder with my gathered evidence of Catherine cheating, as well as the letter and a few other legal documents from my attorney stating that she was ordered not to contact me, and the details of how to access her belongings located at the storage unit that I had rented. After a quick goodbye, I left and drove back to the city. On Sunday, I woke up to several missed calls, voice messages, and text messages. Turns out, Catherine had come home early after being alerted to something being afoot in town, only to find an empty house and a for rent sign out front. Freaking out, she had gone to my parents, who closed the door on her the moment that they answered, forcing her to call everyone until she managed to somehow be contacted by Becky and told that she had a package for her. I was told that she didn't take too well to that, as I fully well knew at that point from the numerous angry texts and voice messages from her, accusing me of setting up Harry, of being deceitful. The nerve, really. I was worried that she might show up at my front door, but nothing ever happened. 5 weeks later, after leaving and being promoted, I write this out for you, dear reader. Granted, it's long, and it took a few rewrites to shorten it down from my initial 14 pages. But I feel that most of what I said was important enough for the story. For those of you that enjoy a true tale of revenge, I really hope you dug this one. This isn't my story, but it comes from my dad and other family members who witnessed it. Now, this all went down in the late 1970s when my father was 17 years old. The area that he grew up in was in the UK and was a stereotypical working class town. The part of town where my family lived in was run down, full of poor families, and had its fair share of crime. But it was a close-knit community and everyone seemed to know everyone else. Put a pin in that for later. Now, my dad growing up wasn't the most well-behaved kid. He was never too fond of school. But aside from a speeding ticket that he got in his late teens, he'd never been in trouble with the police. He was and still is a really talented musician and led a very active social life back then. For his 17th birthday, one of his friends had bought him a leather jacket with a very specific logo on it. We'll call this friend Dave for future reference. According to my dad, it was a rare and quite expensive motorcycle jacket. He was extremely happy that David got it for him. David bought himself the same jacket a while before, and it was a big surprise. My grandma apparently joked that with the jackets on, they looked like twins, and she wasn't far off. They had similar features, black hair, and were both well known for being kitted out in motorcycle gear. A few days after my dad's birthday, he was leaving his busboy job at a pub in the town center at around 10 p.m. As he was getting close to where his bike was parked, a group of 5 men approached him from behind. The last thing my dad remembers was being smacked over the head with something and passing out as he hit the floor. These men beat up my dad with bike chains and a crowbar, literally to within an inch of his life. Luckily, 2 bouncers from a nearby pub had heard the commotion and rushed over to help. The men all ran off. The bouncers called the cops, and my dad was ultimately taken to a hospital. It turned out that Dave had quite a substantial gambling habit and owed a large amount of money to people who you really didn't want to owe money to. They had threatened Dave and told him that they would be looking for him to teach him a lesson. So Dave decided to set up my dad to take the beating instead of himself, or at least lessen his chances of taking it. He had bought my dad the same jacket because these guys knew that was what he wore when he rode. He then arranged for a guy he knew to find out when my dad left work and call up the loan sharks to let them know where Dave was. Even as I'm typing this out, it just leads me to think that Dave was the ultimate scumbag. My grandfather and grandmother were obviously distraught about this whole thing. The first thought on my grandfather's mind was if my dad was going to survive. When that question was answered, his second thought was how to best go about getting revenge. A little bit of background on my grandfather. He was a lifelong boxer and a career military man. He enlisted at the back end of World War II at 17. He stayed in the forces through Korea and then served in Malaysia and Burma as a scout and sniper during the mid to late 1950s. He only reluctantly retired when my dad was a little boy, and then he worked as an engineer after his discharge. The guy was a certified badass, even well into his 50s, and although he wasn't the best husband or father at times, he would never stand by and watch his family get hurt. The first move my grandpa made was to call up every ex-service buddy that he knew, every bouncer in town, every pub landlord, and even a few less than legit characters that he knew from within the pubs. In my town, word traveled fast, and my grandpa was well liked and had a bit of a reputation, so it wasn't long before he had the names and addresses of the 5 men who had attacked my dad. Apparently, these guys had been bragging about beating up a defenseless man from behind. These guys were career criminals with violent reputations, but my grandpa really didn't give a shit who they were or what they were. My grandpa then called up a few of the most dangerous, hardened guys that he knew from the service. He explained to them what had happened to his boy, and they were all happy to help. One night, the group went around town and kicked in the doors of each thug and beat them to a pulp. All 5 of them. They knew that if they hit one, the others would hear about it and run, so they hit all 5 in the same night. My grandpa knew that no one would call the police in the area that they lived in. Talking to the cops was a big no-no back then, so there was little chance of being caught. All 5 guys ended up bloodied with broken bones, shattered teeth, and the requirement to be fed from a tube by the end of the night. One of them even had to be put into a medically induced coma. Of course, the police interviewed all of them in the hospital when they had sufficiently recovered, but none of them talked, both out of fear of my grandfather and fear that they would be labeled as rats. And nothing came of it. But my grandpa, he wasn't done there. My grandfather used his connections in the clubs and bars to start spreading rumors about why they had been beaten up. Soon, it had gotten around that these 5 guys had fucked up and had beaten up the wrong person. Not only that, but they had bragged about it and lied to whoever they worked for about it. Not only were they physically broken, but my grandfather ruined their criminal credibility, so that when they got out, no one, criminal or otherwise, wanted to be associated with them. Once this was all done, my grandpa turned his attention to Dave. He had specifically left Dave for last, knowing that he would shit himself, knowing that my grandfather knew what he had done. My grandpa, however, was far more subtle in dealing with Dave, as he thought that a simple beating would be far too good for him. He waited and asked around. Turns out that Dave was not only a compulsive gambler, but had recently developed quite the drug habit. My grandpa found out who he was buying from, when he would usually buy, and where this took place. He had a buddy of his follow Dave when he went to buy his stuff, then follow him to where he was living, and let my grandfather know. My grandfather then called in an anonymous tip that there was a huge drug deal going on at that address, and he thought that he had heard gunshots. He got 2 of his buddies to do the same. The police investigated, searched the house, and caught Dave red-handed, with boatloads of drugs in his home, as well as counterfeit bills and a bunch of other illegal stuff. Dave was then charged, denied bail, and ended up pleading guilty to all the charges laid against him. My dad could never remember his exact sentence, but it was definitely heavy. Something in the neighborhood of 15 years. To add to all of that, Dave owed a lot of money to a lot of people, and his time in prison was likely made much worse by this fact. My dad never spoke to Dave again. Dave's parents wrote him off as a son. His girlfriend dumped him. And once he got out, he struggled to get a job with his record. He had to move miles away as no one he knew wanted anything to do with him anymore. My dad eventually recovered from his injuries, although you can still see various scars on his body from the beating that he took that night. My grandfather never told anyone what he had done until my dad asked him about it when he fell ill in the early 90s. Dave's life was ruined, and out of the 5 who attacked my dad, 3 ended up in prison later in life, and 2 ended up dead due to crime. My grandfather passed away in the late 90s, and although my dad and him had their issues, it could never be said that my grandpa didn't look out for him when he needed it the most. My parents divorced when I was in 1st grade. Not only did my dad disappear like Houdini afterward, but he stole my mother's ATM card, the one to her personal account, and then drained her dry. My mother, being the saint that she is, didn't even bat an eyelash. She still was cordial to him and never uttered a negative word about him to me. Although he abandoned us, to me, my dad was still my hero. From 1st through 5th grade, I had the usual abandoned by dad stories. Maybe 1 or 2 visits in a year, along with 50 or so times of me waiting by the front window with my suitcase packed up to go to his house, and him never showing up. My mom, through all of this, was supportive and never had an ill word to say about him. So for that time, he stayed my hero. When I was in 6th grade, though, my mother finally remarried, and my father, who only had a picture of me at 8 months old in his wallet, went ballistic. Did I mention that he never paid child support? He would go so far as to use his father's social security number. They had the same name, to get away with this. After my mom remarried, he let it be known that I was now my stepdad's responsibility. He cut off all communication with me until after I graduated high school. He didn't attend my graduation or even send a card. What he did do was write me an email thanking God that he no longer had to pay child support, which was weird because as I just said, he didn't anyway. What really broke me, though, was his ruthless and brutal attack on my mom, attacking her weight, her looks, her teeth, blaming any perceived negative traits that I had on her. For the first time, I realized what a cowardly piece of shit he was. I then responded in kind. He told me that I was no child of his and that I was a waste. And it was after that interaction that I vowed to myself that no matter how long it would take, I'd find a way to hurt him. Well, 10 years later, my father, not interested in my wedding or my new son, reached out to me. You see, he's a diabetic, and one of his organs was failing. He didn't have long. He's too far down the donation list, and he needed someone in our family to donate an organ in order to save his life. Nuclear revenge activated. I answered the email. I met up with him and pretended that I didn't hate his guts. I went and got tested to see if I was a match. I was. I did the therapy and met with doctors and his therapist. We moved ahead and we scheduled the surgery. The day of the surgery, we meet outside of the hospital. I walked up to this man, smiled in his face, and let him know that I wouldn't be going through with it. I watched the confusion sink all over his face. I just wanted you to know that you're no father to me, and you're a waste. I then walked away, left the hospital, and drove home. My mom was pretty annoyed with me that I took it that far. My dad is dying, and I'll be attending his funeral out of spite. Nobody's asked me to speak, but I won't be shy about letting everyone know just what a piece of he really was. Edit. Wow, this really blew up. For those questioning my actions, I'll give a bit more detail. My father was and is semi-obsessed with my mother. His attachment to us was only in his perceived ability to get back with my mom. In the beginning, he would call and make plans to see us, and just not show up. My mom would have to make up excuses on his behalf. He's been married 5 times, and supports and loves his stepkids without a thought to us. Once my mother remarried, he was officially done with us. He kept in contact with my mom through email, but he had no interest in talking to his kids. I reached out to him multiple times along the way, to invite him to my graduation, to let him know of my marriage, and that he was a grandfather. All I got back were pictures of his new wife's kiddos. Upon getting to know him after agreeing to donate, I went to one of his therapy sessions at his request. There is where I heard the story of the true reason that he reached out to me. I listened as he lamented about his impending death, how when he learned about it, he was resigned to his fate, only to have his new wife remind him of his former kids and the possibility that one of them might donate. And this excited him, because apparently he had forgotten all about us. Do you know how shitty it is to listen to the person who's responsible for your very existence talk about forgetting that very existence? Like, I was a pair of sturdy old work boots that just gathered dust in the back of the hall closet. Now rediscovered, I was to be worn to go shovel shit. I knew there and then I wasn't going to give that man anything. I'm not worried about a will or being left anything. He had nothing to leave. He's the male equivalent of a gold digger. He only marries women who can take care and support him as he mooches off of them. He stole thousands from my mom, and she didn't press charges because she didn't want her children's father in jail. My mom was his first wife, and he learned his lesson not to have kids of his own, but to move into ready-made families. His ex-wives and their children, they have nothing nice to say about him either. The cold thing about it was, when I told him I wasn't going through with it, he understood exactly why. All he could do was nod his head in understanding.